Let me also join Andrew Latham in at this point, Professor of International Relations. He's live from Minneapolis, United States of America with us. Professor Latham, what do you make of this amendment brought about by Pakistan?
Well, it seems to codify something which had been a reality anyway, which is that Pakistan has drifted into what I would call a state of hybrid democracy, which is to say that the rudiments of democracy are there. There's a written constitution, elected civilian leadership, etc. But, and this is a big but, an increasingly formalized and consolidated role for the military in Pakistan's governance. It's not an outright military dictatorship, obviously. It's not an outright civilian-led democracy, obviously. It's in that gray zone politically between those two. That has been the case for a while, perhaps since the birth of the Pakistani state, but certainly now as codified in these constitutional changes. I think your previous guest is correct that the moment sort of produced itself with the election of Donald Trump, and the military leadership in Pakistan took advantage of the opportunity. Remains to be seen exactly how the White House will respond, but I don't think it will be terribly critical of this move, shall we say.
Right. Also, Professor Latham, as far as this move is concerned, it would literally elevate General Munir into an unelected dictator, wouldn't it? It would give him extraordinary powers, which normally an army general would not have, even over the executive in Pakistan, in a supposed democracy, might I add.
Yes. Well, yes, that's what I was driving at with respect to this notion of a hybrid democracy. It's neither fully military dictatorship, it's not the Third Reich, nor is it a flourishing and deeply robust liberal democracy of the kind that Americans at least imagine the United States to be. It's very much in between, and the balance of power, and we always have to think about balance of power, not just separation of power, but balance of power between the three branches, the executive, judicial, and executive, and in Pakistan's case, the military as part of that executive, really curtailing the power of the judiciary, really curtailing the power of the legislative branch, and really enhancing the power of a militarized executive branch. That is, if it were to deliver the goods, one might hold one's nose and say, okay. But as the previous guest pointed out, the Pakistani state has not been delivering the goods for the Pakistani people for some time. And this is, at least in my judgment, from my perspective, a long way away. This is not likely to enhance the daily lot of the average person in Pakistan.
Yes, Professor Latham, once again, what would the U.S. president say on this? The U.S. is an upholder of democracies and democratic values and ideals. Surely this is not in consonance with what the U.S. stands for or should stand for, is it?
No, but the United States, at least since at the end of the Second World War, has, when it wants, it has been able to hold its nose and say, well, he's not, he may be a military dictator. Lyndon Johnson used more colorful language, as he always did. He may be a military dictator, but he's our military dictator. And so the United States has always, at least during the Cold War and now this post-Cold War era, has demonstrated a willingness to say, well, we're in a titanic struggle with the Soviet Union, now the People's Republic of China. And that means we have to do business with perhaps unsavory characters. What we would really like in South Asia is India and Pakistan to get along, that Pakistan to consolidate itself as a member of Team America, that it will help us contain Iran and the Taliban and ISIS and Afghanistan, etc., that India will help check China in the broader Indo-Pacific. And those two countries, India and Pakistan, will get along wonderfully together. One has to be blind to history and willfully blind to what's happening at the moment to think that that's likely to be the case. But that is the aspiration and the dream in the so-called blob, the foreign policy establishment in Washington, D.C. And I think that more than anything else accounts for President Trump's willingness to play host to now Marshal Munir, and to, this has of course enraged the Indian media chattering classes. But from an American perspective, if they could pull it off, if they could get both India and Pakistan on Team America in a predictable and robust way, that would be a win from Washington's perspective. And so from viewed through that lens, I do not see the White House really kicking up much of a fuss about this. In fact, President Trump himself is likely to say, well, at certain points in history, countries need strong leadership. And he would point to himself, and he would point to a few others around the globe, and he would certainly point to the Pakistani case and say, this is one of those cases. I wish you the best.
And also what's amusing is that this happens after, without any electoral or sort of military victory. One would expect something like this if there has been a big military conquest or big military prowess, but that has not happened with Pakistan. In fact, they got battered by India earlier this year in Operation Sindoor.
Yeah, I mean, to broaden the aperture just a little bit, one would expect this to be a reaction to a crisis of sorts, right? Something went really, really bad, and a strong man has to step in to save the day. Or something went really, really right, and a strong man could say, look, I achieved X, I achieved Y, I achieved Z. Let me get on with business. Don't interfere with me. But to the extent that I can tell, neither of those things have happened in Pakistan. Operation Sindoor was not a victory, to be sure, but it wasn't a devastating defeat either, at least not perceived to be as such. And no real victories either along the Afghan border or against various insurgent groups within Pakistan. I'm not quite sure what accounts for the timing, but historically, traditionally, it would have been in response to a crisis or in response to a great victory. And neither of those two things seem to obtain in this particular case.
All right. So appreciate you joining us, Andrew, with your perspective on that story.